All right, there we go. Wei, thank you for taking the time.
Of course,
How's it going?
it's going well. Yeah, it's can't complain. How are you?
I'm pretty good. We met, right? Like you were the first person I ever met in my career. First day, it's true. First day, DHX Vancouver was my first job, and we were like orientation day, and I think we didn't know we were on the same project. Was it? Like I don't know. It's kind of like
You were sitting next to me. Yeah, yeah. We didn't know. We talked, and we're like, oh, we're gonna be on the same project.
it's so weird because like back in college, like my best friend from college was the same thing. We randomly sat together next to each other the first day, and that's how I met my best friend in college. So kind of like the same dynamic. So you are a story artist for Netflix. For those who doesn't know, the only person I know who won an Emmy for storyboarding. um, and also you made your personal short film, which is quite an achievement. I saw like it just won the what was it, like a Spark Animation, the
Yeah,
Canadian Film Prize,
that's
Spark
right.
Animation. So congrats, and also like a Tribeca selected film. So that's
Thanks.
pretty cool. Um, well, I guess like how did you like? How was it winning an Emmy? How did that happen? Like I know a bit, right? Like I know it's so like you didn't look for it.
Yeah, the way I like to tell the story, the way I tell the story is, it's a lot of luck and a lot of political alignment, I suppose. The producer liked me, so he submitted my work on Carmen Sandiego, that is. And I don't know. I When I look at that year's work, I just feel like there's so many things that's better. I don't know why they chose it. Maybe because it's Netflix show. I don't know. I
Better in your work or better in general in the show?
Both.
You still won though.
Yeah, I guess maybe not better, but more impressive, I would say. Um, anyway, yeah, it was strange. It's during the pandemic. It was over a phone call. I just received a call, and they were like, "Hey, we're calling from, I can't remember what it's called, the Emmy, like National Academy of something
Yeah,
something
yeah.
in science or something, and we have some news for you next week. Someone's gonna call you next week. Is it just We just want to make sure this is the right number and everything." I'm like, okay, I guess maybe I'm nominated or something. And then when they called, they were just like, "You won." I'm like, "What? You won the thing for storyboard?" I'm like, "Okay." And honestly, I started telling my friends, like close,
I remember when you told me.
yeah.
I
And I
remember like
was
you
like,
told me they called you and you were like, I wonder like what's this? Like, yeah, nominated and stuff like that.
well,
You
I honestly thought it was a prank. I was like, maybe someone's trying to prank me. I don't know for what. It was just like full
but
imposters.
didn't like DHX, like the producer told you beforehand they were gonna
No, no,
submit?
no. They contact the winners first. They tell
Okay.
the winners first before they tell anyone.
So did you like contact like Brian or
Yeah,
someone,
afterwards.
and they were like, what's going on? Like, is this true? Is it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Afterwards. Um, but I didn't end up going to the ceremony because it was 2020, the pandemic. Was no ceremony, right? Um, and yeah, now it's a chunk of metal sitting on my desk.
Oh, come on, Shankamelo.
No, but seriously, it really doesn't. It doesn't mean it.
Do you think it changes the way productions like studios see you? Because I guess like from an HR point of view, that's like, if you go through a checklist, there must be like something that add value. Like
Not that I'm
it's just
aware
like,
of.
no,
Not that
okay.
I'm aware of. Um, Honestly, so this is my honest thought. These are my honest thoughts. It means it shouldn't mean anything, and it truly doesn't mean, I mean, of course I'm grateful. Of course I'm honored to be recognized. Of course, when I got it, I was like ecstatic and had adrenaline pumping through me. I was like, oh my God, this happened, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, what does it do for me as a person, first of all? Nothing. It made me feel good for a day, a week, maybe. But like, did it make me a better person? Did it teach me any lessons? Did it give me anything valuable in terms of life? Truly, no. Other than like,
But
just
like
happy
I guess like
for that
my
time.
question is like from a negotiation
From a
standpoint.
career perspective,
Yeah,
I also don't think it
because like
amounts.
like how, but how like every like when they win it, okay, it's a bit different when you win an Academy Award. But like they say, like when
Yeah,
you win Academy Award, you have like different negotiation power. Now everybody wants to make a film with you and stuff like that. So I
yeah.
was wondering, like, but you think the Emmy doesn't like change your negotiation power when it comes to like?
Not that
I
not
mean,
that
I guess.
I said I don't go like, hey, you should pay me more because I have an Emmy. No, like the I got my first job at Netflix because actually because of the animatic for my short film. They didn't even know I had an Emmy. I think maybe the recruiter did, but the directors who decided to interview me and decided to give me the job, they learned that I had an Emmy during the interview because the producer said so. So they
Oh,
like it didn't even have any, it didn't matter to them that I had an Emmy. It was all about what I did in my animatic. And that's the way
yes,
it should be. That's the way it should be.
I agree. I agree. But
So
maybe, yeah, like probably like like the Emmy just represents like that, like the quality of the work, and so inevitably like you like it's the quality of the work that gets you the gigs and the negotiation power more than the Emmy itself, and the Emmy is just like a representation of that.
yeah, and so for me it's more about my work speaking for itself, not me waving the Emmy around, being like, this means my work. You know what I mean? Like I never bring up the Emmy in interviews.
Well, that will be a douche. It wouldn't be
Yeah.
like a
So
nice move.
douchey. Yeah. Like, no.
You just like go into a Zoom meeting and you just have it like, like those people that have like in the background and just.
Yeah. The only, okay, I would say this. It once in a while when I do look over at the Emmy that's on my desk, um, what happens in my mind is that that's what I should live up to, is being an artist that should
That,
deserve this.
then does it
So,
add pressure or not, or is it just like
not
inspirational?
pressure, more like said, not pressure, just more like determination and drive. Because it is also encouraging, right? Like it's not
Yeah.
just like, it's not dangling in front of me. It's like, we believe that you can do this,
Yeah.
right? It's them believing me, which again, I'm super honored and grateful for in that regard.
So
It does make myself feel like I believe in myself, which is a completely psychological thing. I honestly wish everyone can win the Emmy. Like, of course, if everyone wins it, it doesn't mean anything, but like everyone can experience that so that they can believe in themselves more and not have to doubt themselves as much. In that sense, the psychological benefits are yeah. So
yeah, no, I get it. I get it. So like before Carmen, so before Netflix, before the Emmy, before Carmen, like how did you end up doing storyboard? Like was it something that you knew you want to do, or because I know a lot of people actually like, I know a lot of people were like into comics and they end up doing storyboard. A lot of people were doing like animation. They want to do like 2D animation. I wanted to be a 2D animator before storyboarding. So how did you end up doing storyboard?
yeah, I went to business school, but I hated business and I just drew throughout school.
We have something in common on that. Did
Yeah,
I
yeah,
tell you?
yeah.
Yeah,
You went
I
to
did
business,
business school too. Yeah,
but I got my degree. Okay.
yeah. I left after 3 months. I was like, yeah, I'm out of here.
That's the smarter thing to do. I shouldn't have done that. Although I would say that like going to university and just like taking humanities and history and all of that, that in the long term is very valuable, I found, in terms of like informing my stories and my thinking and all that. Maybe not directly financially beneficial, but development as a person and like view on life is very useful. Yeah, so after business school, I uh, started just doing comics. Then I realized I needed to learn how to draw. So I went back to animation school to learn how to draw. Not so much because I loved animation, because I honestly was like just going because I wanted to learn to draw. And but there's a animation industry in Vancouver. So when I came out, the easiest thing financially is to get a job in the
No, like
industry.
originally, like you went to animation school to learn how to draw because you wanted to be a comic artist.
Yeah,
So like your career plan was to be a comic artist.
yeah.
And why was that? Like why not? Like why? Because you'd never consider animation, or because you felt like maybe it was closer to what you want to achieve storytelling wise?
I think both. Yeah, just because with comics you can tell a full length story as one person, and
More control on your storytelling.
yeah, more control. And this was during the time when there were a lot of like new types of stories happening in comics. Like a lot, like indie was kind of exploding, and so yeah, the type of storytelling that was happening was inspiring comics as well for me. Um, yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty much.
Or go back. You can go back to your thought that I interrupted. So like you went to animation school, and when you came out, animation was prevalent in Vancouver.
Yeah, so I needed a job, so I got a job in the industry, and yeah, quickly started doing boards.
You
It's
didn't do revisions first. You just started as a board artist.
No, I started as like a background cleanup artist. Yeah.
Fun.
No, it was terrible.
I mean, I guess someone enjoys it, but yeah.
I hope so. I hope someone enjoys it, but I don't know. I don't know if anyone can enjoy it for that long. Yeah, that's pretty much.
And then from there, how did you end up in storyboarding? Just like happen, random?
Oh, I always work on my own personal stuff. And so I didn't, so the animation school that I went to was 2 years. You don't make a film. You have one storyboarding course. So it's really hard to have like a comprehensive storyboarding portfolio. And I didn't. So afterwards, I spent some time developing my portfolio. And then, yeah, I was working on an animatic. It was my first animatic. It was honestly terrible. But it was good enough to get me.
I want to see it now. I want to see this animatic.
Oh,
You say it's terrible, then maybe it's like I don't know. I don't trust you on that judgment, but okay.
I'll show you off camera.
Okay, fair. And I guess like how does like I guess so like you kind of like randomly ended up in storyboarding. Originally, you
No,
want to be.
I'm aimed for
Yeah,
storyboarding.
no, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like you started like wanting to be a comic book artist, right? Like, and you end up doing storyboard. And I guess you had some career goal at the beginning, maybe. Did you?
Animation?
Like, yeah. Did you have like did you start storyboarding me like, oh, I want to end up doing this, or like did you had like? And my question mainly is like, how did that change then compared to now? Your goals in storytelling.
Yeah. So, I mean, at first it was just because it was the closest thing to comics. You get to draw, you get to tell stories, and you make more money, right? And it's so funny because like when I remember thinking, oh man, eventually you can make twice as much doing boards as you are a junior background artist or whatnot. I'll just work half the year, and then the other half I'll just work on my own projects, right?
That's what
But
what everybody says. And
that's
then
what everyone says. But then the moment you start making that money, you're like, oh yeah, I need more of this money.
it's funny because like you're like the least capitalistic person I know in North America, I guess. But
But I guess eventually I did do that.
no, you did, yeah.
I
Well,
did.
I guess like in your case, you couldn't just do half a year. You had to do like full years to have enough to stop for a full year.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right? Like, because otherwise, I feel like the danger with that, like with doing half a year of work and half a year of personal projects, that you can't finish the project in half a year, and it's gonna be really tough to come back to it in a year,
Yeah.
right? As I guess we'll find out very soon when I ask you about your personal film. Um, so yeah, like let's talk about the personal film. Like how did the idea came up, and what was the reason why you decided to do like a personal short film?
Yeah, so Tehura is the film that completed early this year. And it honestly, originally, I just wanted to make a short film because, like I said, my animation school, we didn't make short films. And I felt like if I'm going to, be part of this industry, if I really want to understand it, I should at least make one short film. So initially it was just to make a short film, but then
And this was like in 2000. When was it?
this was like 2014. That in terms
Okay,
of
so way before we met. Yeah.
way
Okay.
before, yeah. And I was gonna make it with a friend, and the friend had suggested French Polynesia as a setting, and I love dance, so I was like, oh, it can be a Polynesian dancer. It was very naive, very, not serious at all. But the more I looked into what it meant to tell a story of a French Polynesian dancer, the more I realized I had to address Orientalism, the body politics, and the body politics of being a female dancer. And then eventually I realized I should go to Tahiti to just ask the community whether or not I should make this film at all, because it's not my story to tell. And so I didn't know anyone in Tahiti. I emailed a bunch of dance chiefs and dancers and schools saying that I was going there. And they were like, cool, yeah, come. And so I went, and I was completely ready for them to be like, why are you doing this? Why are you trying to make a film about our culture? And I wouldn't have a good answer. And then I was ready to leave that trip thinking, okay, I'm not going to make this film. But instead, they welcomed me beyond anything I could imagine, beyond, to such a unconditional support, such a level of unconditional support that they gave me. Everyone that I met tried to help, and everyone that helped was willing to give more than I have to offer, that I was asking for.
And what was this like? This first trip? When was it?
This is 2016.
So 2 years after the first concept.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was like spending time writing, researching, thinking, and then ultimately decided to take this trip. And so if it wasn't for their support, I probably wouldn't have made the film. Yeah.
And then so 2016 you went there, and then you kept developing, I guess, the storyboard and the design.
So I rewrote the story after the trip.
Okay.
Because of the people that I met. I ended up, after 5 minutes of meeting this art teacher, he invited me to stay with him and his family for the rest of the trip. and we spent nights talking about what it meant to be contemporary Tahitian and how colonialism has affected and evolved their dance. And I met someone that choreographed the final dance piece in my film, and that choreography was very much based on the story of her life. And so, yeah, a lot of things were rewritten and then reworded based on the experience that I had in Tahiti, based on what I learned in Tahiti.
And in the meantime, you were also like working full time, right?
Yeah.
And then eventually you decided that you needed to take, was it like a whole year or was it less, more?
Eventually, I actually did a second trip back to Tahiti to record the music, because I wanted the music to be by local musicians. I wanted the voice acting to be by local people. And I also recorded a lot of sounds of nature while I was in Tahiti. And to also re-choreograph the dance to make it as authentic as possible. Yeah, then I came back, redid the animatic again. And in 2020,
When you say like redid the animatic, you mean like completely or like parts of it?
Mainly the dance choreography. Yeah.
But the structure of the storytelling was the same?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, yeah, in 2020, I was going to take the whole year to work on the short film. But another project came up that was pretty interesting. It was a comic project with a local architecture firm. And it was a really interesting concept, very humanitarian based. And it was
like, you said it was for the, if I remember, it was like a Venice
Biennale. Yeah.
Biennale. Yeah.
Yeah. In Italy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, because I got to write it, and they really trusted me in terms of like how I wanted to approach the story and to draw it and everything. And they were willing to match my salary from my previous job. I decided to take it. That ended up being like 5 months. And so I didn't end up taking all of 2020, but then in 2021, I took 5 months to finally finish the short film.
Okay. And like, just because you mentioned the comic for the Venice Biennale, if I remember correctly, the concept of it, was it like two stories that met in the middle? Was it?
Yeah. So the story. So the concept is they were proposing to build this kind of like apartment complex to help with the refugee situation in Italy. And the idea was to build it on the waters of Venice, and it would be sold to, rich tourists as timeshares. But when the tourists aren't there, it would house refugees. So it would be this like gathering place, a place that Westerners and refugees can interact together, and it would have all the support for refugees. And yeah, so it was kind of a interesting and somewhat radical, but also commercial idea. It was pretty neat. So the comic was to tell this fictional story of two families, one refugee family, one American family, tourist family, meeting together in this place. And so the way that I had designed the book was that if you read it left to right, you would see the perspective of the American family. And then if you read it right to left, so basically from quote unquote the back of the book to the inside of the book, you would read the perspective of the refugee family. And there are events that are the same, but told differently because of the perspective difference. And in the middle, it was I think they call it like the manifesto of this project, this proposal, this idea. So yeah, it was conceptually pretty interesting.
Yeah, it was very. Yeah, I remember when you told me about it. It was very. Yeah, I was very impressed with the concept. Do you think like this kind of experience, like for example, this is like an unusual idea of storytelling, right, through comic, does that experience, for example, influence the way you work for like more commercial work now? Like, does any of these like do you feel like these different storytelling experience influence other aspects of your storytelling in different media, or do you feel like they're kind of like a separate?
I try not to see them separately. Um, and I wouldn't so much say that it's like that project influences my other projects. It's more that project allowed me to more fully express my voice and my thought process, my way of storytelling. And I always try to bring that, whether it's a commercial job, commercial project, or my own project. But of course, recognizing the parameters I'm working with, right? In commercial world, there are always other voices that you have to take into consideration, and you know you have to recognize that certain things there's no point in challenging that. So you kind of assume certain parameters, but based on those parameters, I try to be as creative as I can.
And like, what's like in your experience, what was the main difference between working for a client like Netflix, like DHX, and doing your personal work? I guess I even like not just like in storytelling, but also like the way I feel like a lot of people struggles, right? Like I personally struggle with my personal project to move forward with them to the finish line, and I know probably you had the same experience. So like, what are the difference between like storytelling for a studio compared to your personal project?
Um,
I'm
what's
guessing like probably like the main one is going to be the freedom, right? But I feel like it's a double-edged sword, right? Like you have the freedom to tell the story you want, but also that the absence of limits can be a challenging. Uh,
For me, I actually find my own personal projects to be way more stressful, and I feel much more pressured, not in terms of deadlines, but in terms of standard. Like what is good enough for me is endless, whereas what's good enough for a studio is
it's more
very
measurable.
is more measurable because you have to submit this thing by this deadline. They tell you these are the things you need to hit. And in terms of the quality of your work, you just take a look at, your fellow artists, and just be honest with yourself where you stand. And if you hit at the similar level as the top artists, then that's the bar, right? Whereas when it's your own stuff, like there's no bar. Like it's when do you say it's good enough, right? So that's a bit more challenging, especially when I tend to feel more of a time crunch with my own work because, I'm taking this time out to dedicate to myself, right? Like that, I mean, that kind of thinking pushes me towards the deadline or pushes me towards doing it and finishing it. But it's also like, it can be psychologically, um, it can be a damaging type of mentality as well because uh it just makes the time feel so much more stressful, like so much is riding on it. Oh man, instead of what's the opportunity cost as a business person, you can understand, like, at one point I calculated like the amount of lost income that I gave up to finish my short film, and it's like,
And that's adding pressure.
yeah, exactly. So at some point you just gotta like block that stuff out, right?
But at the same time, like you can't really like measure an ROI on your personal project. Like the rate of like it's so, I don't know, like if the main thing from your personal project is probably like reputation. Like I don't know, like it's not really like a measurable thing.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Um,
But like I guess like so like if you're like in your experience, like you have like this high standard, right, for yourself, and there's no limit to it, as you said. Like, how do you overcome that? Like, how do you put a stop to it and be like, this is good enough, and I'm just gonna move on? Because I'm
So
sure, like, probably you still watch your film and you're not satisfied with everything of it, maybe, right?
the
Being so perfectionist on your own projects.
yeah, um, I would say so. My partner is a therapist, a counselor, and she introduced me to a lot of like mindfulness practices and meditation and um, just a lot of yeah. Through her and her books, I thought a lot more about my relationship to myself, um, and the voices that are in my head and all of that. Um, so that's that's really what helped the most, to be honest. Um, to recognize like what power am I giving to certain instinctual judgments I have of not just myself, but of things surrounding me, and where that power came from, where that judgment comes from, and then letting it go and recognizing what are the benefits these instincts afforded me, but also what hindrance is causing me as well. Because like the perfectionism, the aiming for a higher standard, like those things pushed us to strive to be better.
Yeah.
Right? And they were great at one point, but at some point it starts to hurt you. It's just yeah.
You gotta
Recognize.
finish it. You gotta finish sometime.
Yeah, yeah. And
But
it wasn't so much like a complete flip over to like from perfectionism to just gotta finish it,
yeah,
because I also don't think that is the best thing. I also want to be proud of my work, right? So it's more like at some point I had to also recognize to myself what are the things that was most important to me about my short film. I know that some of the animation, quite a bit of the animation, is probably a bit janky to an animator's eyes, right? Um, but I don't care about it's gonna sound bad, but I don't care about animation. Like I
well,
don't see
it doesn't sound bad. Like, the way you frame it is just like you have priorities in what you want to achieve with the short film. Animation wasn't like your main one,
no,
right?
no. Like for me, the most important thing was telling a story that is, to me, worth telling and telling it in a way that I think is an interesting and powerful way to tell a story. Um, and I feel now when I look at the film, yes, I can be like that animation is not that great, but I'm proud of this whole thing, this story as a whole, this art piece as a whole. It's
Did you
flawed, but
did you like at some point question if you would ever finish it? Like,
no,
did you
no,
ever want it to stop? Like, do you ever thought like this is like way too much, too complicated, too
no,
long? No?
no.
Was it
You,
because like you had this commitment to other people as well, to tell other people's story, and you didn't want to?
yeah. If it, I can't say whether or not I would have finished a short film if I didn't, if the Tahitian dance community wasn't so generous and didn't, at one point, like the person I was staying with, he said, you have to make this film because we don't have a film like this. So yeah, um, I felt like I had to reciprocate what they gave me, or else I would just be a lie, you know. So at some point, it was more about what kind of person I wanted to be rather than what kind of artist I wanted to be, which in a lot of ways I think it's a more powerful motivator, because at least the type of artist that we're talking about here is a very, very individualistic one. It's very like just fulfilling what our individual desires, and that's it's not it. There can be meaning in that, but not as meaningful as like something a whole community gave you. That made my life unique. That made my perspective unique. That made my relationship to art unique. In my opinion.
Yeah. So like, if you had to sum up like the whole like short film experience, it was like was there something unexpected that you learned from the whole process? Like, if there's one thing that comes to mind,
Um,
that maybe like you didn't like knew about yourself or about the process before starting it, way back in 2014.
yeah, I mean, what I said just now is part of that. And I mean, it's something I've it's something that I've always thought of, that um, the people that I admire in life, the people that I look up to, actually aren't really artists. They're like mothers that um have to mothers that somehow find a way to speak to their kids in such a, to me, inspiring way, because they to that minuscule degree, they respected their humanity in that moment, and they knew how to do that. And at the same time, they're full of love and joy and happiness, even though they're sleep deprived. And at the same time, they're still volunteering for climate action stuff. Like, that mother inspires me more. And, my neighbor who's dealt with like almost dying, and then his body is now, he can't do the things he used to be able to do, and it affects his personality, but he still finds an acceptance and reconciliation with himself, within himself. These to me are like way more inspiring than what this great artist has done to make a piece of art that people enjoyed, right? And despite that, like I know this, I always felt this in the past. Being good at drawing at a young age, and like feeling like, oh, this is something I can do. We hold on to that, right? And we find safety in that, and we find pride in that, right? And then it becomes hard to let go. But I feel like the film helped me let go, because the most important thing with the film was the connection with the community. It was giving back, and everything it was just tedious and work, right? The actual art making part was just a means to that end, right? And so in that sense, it doesn't matter what the means is now to me, right? Now, like I've gone more into climate activism and the climate movement, and I realized that like community building within the climate movement, that's like the new art medium to me now, right? It's not the only medium. I'm still going to draw and write stories and all that, but now I'm able to see that just as part of my artistic identity, or just my personhood.
Would you do like another short film now?
No. I mean, it's, yeah. On the one hand, like it's easier now to get grants and stuff, right? Because I have this film. And then so I can probably hire a team and direct rather than animate it myself. And there were a few ideas. I'm actually, putting together some pitches.
You said no, but it's not true, huh?
It depends on the opportunity, right? Like,
yeah.
And I'm putting together pitches with for example, like that neighbor that I told you about, and my friend who, philosophy saved his life from. He's a philosopher, so philosophy saved his life from the brutality of homophobia in his country. Like, again, it's not about making a short film anymore, right? It's
Yeah.
about what projects I believe in.
And like to jump back to your main like commercial work, we're talking about like a bit like about like what was the process and what was hard about the short film, but like what's in your opinion the hardest part about storyboarding, especially like for a studio?
Now, or
Yeah, like in general, like in your experience, what do you think is the hardest part of the process of storyboarding for Netflix or for any like commercial TV show or film?
depends on what perspective you're asking this from. Do you mean what is hardest in terms of like getting the job done as a board artist? From that perspective, now where I am, it's really just the grind of drawing, because I still love the writing process, the creative collaboration with directors and team members, and I love figuring things out. But then you have to clean up and adding poses. That stuff is just like,
Oh,
oh
the cleanup.
yeah. I mean, even when I don't clean up, it's like just adding poses. Like when it just becomes the drawing, and there's no more like creative story decision making because time is up. That's
Do you enjoy drawing still? Because I know
uh
like we had this conversation. I always say like I cannot say out loud, but I'm gonna say out loud like I don't enjoy drawing per se. Like I guess like I'm one of the few artists that I don't spend like my whole day on a sketchbook drawing all the time. Like I remember even in college I wasn't one of those. I would say like I like storyboarding because I like the storytelling process. I like making the image that tell the story, choosing the composition that convey the story point, that moment, all that kind of stuff. But the drawing itself, I find it extremely like not frustrating but painful because like I have like this concept like, oh, I'm gonna do this shot, this acting, I'm gonna show this moment, blah blah blah, and then I have to do it. Like I love all the part where I think about the storytelling, but I don't enjoy as much the part where I draw because I feel like it's slow me down compared to like the part where I think about the storytelling and what I want to do. Then I have to do it, and that's just like executing something that I thought. The
yeah.
exciting part is thinking about it, the making it, just like you have to do it because otherwise you cannot communicate with other people. But do you still enjoy drawing?
You're talking about specifically in work.
Yeah.
There are moments that I still enjoy drawing, and there are actually the moments where it's like, oh, I get to draw something different. I get to draw something
True.
new, and it's like, oh, it's because like I've never tried to tell this type of story or this type of story this way. And so, yeah, if I have to, there's a lot of repetition in animation, right? There are
Yeah.
so many things. And I don't just mean like in terms of our work, drawing the same thing. I mean like repetition in terms of types of stories that we get to tell. And so often we're drawing basically the same thing in just like a different way, right? That's boring. That gets boring to me.
I guess like to me like I still find exciting drawing when there's still like room to figure out something. Like
Yes. Yeah.
but like when I get a clear idea in my mind and I know that's what I want to do, and then I have to execute it, I don't find it as exciting. Also, like in my process, I have like this awful rough drawing that I do because sometimes like in my mind is like, oh, this is how the sequence is gonna work. Maybe I write it down or depends on the process of that show. But like then I do like this like almost like circle for heads and and then I look at the whole thing going through the panels and I'm like, okay, like this is working or like this shot doesn't really flow with the rest and I change it. but those drawings are like barely understandable to anyone. But once those drawings are figured out for me, and I see the sequences working, and I know that once I'm gonna finish the drawing, probably it's gonna work, at least in my opinion. Then
Right.
everybody has different opinions. Then the part where I make the drawing rough but at least understandable to other people is the part I don't enjoy anymore. I just like,
But do you not find that there are certain sequences that you care about, that you're excited about, that like you want it to
oh yeah,
just right, that you're like, oh yeah, yeah, the expression goes from this and then this and then this, because that's exactly how I think this character, you know,
yeah, yeah.
moment.
That is true, but also like what I experience is like the excitement. Except like for few sequences, it depends also on the project and who I'm
Yeah,
working with. Because like some sequence, like you're very excited about it, and you figure it out, and then you get it on the paper, well, on the screen, and you're like, oh, I really like, which is, I guess it's awful to say because it feels like you're out of glory, like self glorifying yourself, but you're like, oh, I love like this part, like I like this thing, right? This specific thing about this sequence. And then you show it, and like, that's why I'm saying it depends who you work with. Some people are
the,
like, oh man, like I like this, maybe we can do this other thing, and this gets super exciting. And other times you just get like a drawing back where they change everything. There's not really a conversation, and that's like, okay, we have to do this board now, and I have to clean up this other person drawing. And we didn't really have a conversation. Didn't feel like
yeah,
my drawing spark anything in the other person. I love like when you show it to
yes,
your supervisor and it sparks something that like you see like the other person lighting up, because maybe they still want to change a lot, but you see like their idea was sparked by your idea, and that's exciting. But
yeah,
when you just get like a bunch of drawing back, it's just like, I mean, that's when I feel like we're very lucky that our job is it's a privilege. I think like the kind of job I always think about it, like, like we make a living doing like drawings for TV. We don't like dig in mine or something. So, but at the same time, when you get those moments where you work with someone who just take your work and don't really like discuss it with you, they just change it and just give it back. That's when it becomes a job and just a paycheck, I feel. And
yeah,
like I know we always have this conversation because like you always tell me like, oh, if you have an idea you believe in, you should like sort of fight for it. Like you should like try to explain why you think this is a better idea and try to find a conversation. And I'm more like, if they don't want my idea, that's it. Like I kind of like, I feel like they are the client I don't want to fight, because like I know there's like sometimes it's not even, they try to do the best to show it to their supervisor, who's going to have to show it to their supervisor. There's all these levels in animation. So like,
sure.
I don't know where I
But
was going,
you'd
but
find it, but it's not useful to think about those levels, right?
no, I don't know. Like I find it
Like
really depends on,
ultimately, what is the goal that makes you most invested and interested in your work?
say it again.
What is the
What's
goal
the goal?
on any project that makes you excited about your work? Like, for example, for me, it's trying to tell a good story, but trying to take the concept, trying to take whatever it is they have, whether it's a script or a concept or whatever, and try to tell that to make that the best story I can. That to me is interesting,
I
right?
I agree. I agree. I
And so,
think
what, like for me, when a director is like, oh, I don't know, like when they make a decision that I don't agree with, to me, that's just a barrier to making that story more like the best it can be. And so I'll just try to overcome that barrier. Does that make sense?
it makes sense, but like for example, I'll give you a practical example. Like
Yeah.
sometimes then this is like a discussion I get a lot, because in animation there's like these beliefs that comedy is flat. That's like one of those things, and I don't believe that. I don't think that's, like, you can get comedy in any kind of show. It depends on the moment, on the story, on the gag, right? I feel like the whole idea of comedy is flat is because most of the time with a flat staging, you get a clear action and reaction, and that's what makes it funnier, right? And I think that's where the whole like comedy is flat comes from. But I don't think a lot of time these notes it's just like a given, right? Like it's just like everybody says that. At some point, we don't even ask ourselves where the whole thing came from, right? And so now everything is comedy is flat, and it doesn't matter if you make, like, I think maybe like a different staging makes it funny as well, and it makes it more interesting. But then I get this note, and I feel like it doesn't always come from thinking, I don't know how you say, like, it just comes from the fact that everybody says the same thing, and so everybody does the same thing in the same way, and so we all have to do the same thing. And
Yeah.
and at that point, like, what is your argument if that's the note that comes to you? Like, they say like, oh, this show we want to make comedy flat because comedy is flat, and you don't really have.
I would go back to the story. I would go back to the specific context of this story that you're trying to tell and remind them what it is that they're trying to do that makes this story unique, and why the different types of shot serves that purpose better than just the assumption of flatness.
Yeah.
Right?
I guess.
I'm not saying like everyone's receptive. I'm not saying this works every time. At some point, they're just going to be like, hey.
But like, like, I feel like it's, I agree with you, but at the same time, I feel like it's a bit simplified, because the way you present it is a bit simplified, because sometimes the note from your supervisor is, for example, in this example, comedy is flat because this is what the showrunner wants for this show.
Yeah,
and that's it. You can't argue with that, right? Like, you can't.
Yeah, that sucks, because you don't get to talk to the showrunner. I've been there. I've been on those shows. That sucks.
I feel like even even on Carmen.
Yeah.
Like, and I think Carmen came out great, and people like won awards and all. But like, when we started, there was like a way more noir pitch that was given, at least to me, when I was recruit. It was way more noir, and I feel like the showrunner, like higher ups, like, I don't know, like maybe the network, I don't know, like, but it became less and less noir and more kids friendly, which makes sense, of course, because it's also like, doesn't matter what we want as a storyteller, it's also like a commercial product, right? But like, even if you want to do it, make it more noir, there are limits to how much you can push against it, right? Of course.
All I'm saying is we can only do the best we can, right? We can still, like, all we can do is make those arguments and push them as far as we can in our position. Whether or not they listen, that's up to them, but at least we've done our part, right?
Well, I guess like in the same realm of opinions in our industry, the other one that I really want to know your opinion on is, there are two schools of thoughts, right? One is a credit is a credit. Doesn't matter the show. For example, like if you get a director credit on a feature film, it doesn't matter if the feature film is awful. You should still take it, because that's going to open up a lot of doors to you. And the other school of thought that I think is the one you are more aligned with is you should pick the shows that you're interested in, and you should pick a show that align with what your career, what you want in your career, right? In your art journey. So like, why am I correct that you're more on the second school of thought?
Yeah, but I don't assume I know the full reasoning behind the first school of thought,
Well,
because
I think the first school of thought has some, you know, I feel like the industry, the the machine part of the industry think in a different way from the artistic part of the industry. So it is true that once you get a director credit, it's easier for other production to hire you because they know at least he managed a project, he managed people, right?
yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I can't say for sure how much weight credits really have, and that's at the end of the day outside of our control, right? Um,
I guess
yeah,
also it depends on where you are in your career. Because like I guess like if you are a new story artist and you never had a story artist credit, it helps to get a story artist credit to work in this industry.
yeah, absolutely. It
Because
matters.
I experienced that. Even when I was recruiting people, when I was a supervisor, I know that um, like sometimes you propose like someone, you're like, this person, this girl is like amazing, like she's really good, and then someone comes up with, but he or she or they never storyboarded before, and they don't want to hire this person just because they don't have experience, right? So
Right.
in that case, I feel like a credit is
Yeah, for sure. Like we do have to recognize, like you were saying, um, the where we are in our career, where we are, like how much privilege we have in our positions. Um, yeah, for someone that needs to have a paycheck, you just got to take what job you can take. Like it makes no sense for us to put pressure on people to be like, pursue your passion, even if you're fully stressed about your next meal. That makes no sense. So fully recognizing that. But I feel like once you are in the industry and you are a decent worker and you make it okay wage, a livable wage, then start acknowledging that you have choices, right? And yeah, you can choose the paths that people say like you got to do this for your career, even if they, it, you got to be okay with the cost of like paving that path. And I just never enjoyed that.
it's
My
also like the thing I don't fully understand it, as you said, like I don't either have the full picture of, I mean, I'm not a director, I didn't get that high up in the food chain, so I don't know how it actually works, but like I don't understand as a normal person, I don't understand why someone would hire you as a director if you directed a bad picture, right? Like I would never hire like a story artist who does bad storyboarding, right? I don't think, so I'm not, that's what I'm always like not understanding about this school of thought. Like I get it, like you have access to more director gigs, but are those director gigs better than the last one? Or because like at the same time, like I see, at least in the Canadian industry, I saw a lot of people that like end up working in preschool because that's what they have access to, but they never get out of it. And they don't enjoy it because I saw them complaining, right, about their job, but
Yeah.
they spend like 20 years in that industry. So I'm like, is that the same thing? Like you get a credit just to get a credit and then you get stuck in that world and you still get an amazing paycheck maybe, but then what about your soul?
Yeah, I find it not fruitful for myself to
I
ask those.
think it served you well. Like the fact that you pick your project. We always have this conversation
Yeah.
outside like I'm more of a working guy. Well, I still pick my project. I don't pick any project, but I'm more grinding multiple jobs, freelance stuff. But you are like a more like pick your project and give your whole to that project, you know. But I think it served you well. So I had to reconsider my position. Yes.
I I don't know. I don't. Is it? Is
Well,
it?
you're not the only one I met. You know, like I met
Sure.
recently a director on a show I was on, and she picked her projects carefully, and she had a pretty amazing career as well. So, you know, I had to reconsider my position about it. But
I don't even know if it's useful to compare. You made the decisions you made in your situation that were
oh,
specific.
I'm happy. I'm not complaining.
Yeah, exactly. So there's no point in compare. Like there are certain type of analysis that's not really fruitful, and maybe it's causing more, you know, maybe not stress, but like
I'm not stressed at
yeah,
all.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, I'm on vacation right now, so I can't be stressed.
Perfect, perfect.
Um, I guess like the other thing I wanted your opinion on, as you experience it more than me. Like you work for Canadian studio, which usually are service studio, right? Like you work at DHX, but DHX is producing for Netflix or for another company, and then you also work at Netflix. And I wonder, is there a difference you experience in the way you work, considering that you have less of those layers we talked about? Like usually like you have a director in-house in a Canadian studio, but then there's like a supervising director in the studio that is commissioning the show,
Yeah,
right? But
the
like if
biggest
you work
difference,
directly with the studio, you have less layer. Yeah.
the biggest difference, yeah, the biggest benefit in terms of working for Netflix rather than working for a studio that's worked for Netflix is exactly what you just mentioned. Is that I get to talk to the actual director or the supervising director.
So
Um,
access is the main difference. You have access to
yeah,
people
like
last word. Yeah.
the example that we talked about earlier, where you have an idea or you think this works better, and you pitch it to your supervisor, and he's just like, "Well, that's what," or they're just like, "Well, that's what the showrunner wants." You don't, you don't, you. That's not the end of the conversation if you work directly for a studio that's paying for everything. I get to go to the showrunner, right, or pitch the showrunner and be like, "Hey, this is what I think. What do you think?" And then we can talk about it there. And they might be like, "I just want you to board as scripted," and I'd be like,
Did it happen to you?
it it happened to me very recently, and it's the first time that it's happened at Netflix. It happened very recently, and but I think it's gonna, like, our next meeting is gonna be better. Like I think
You're always so positive way.
I, I think yeah, I don't think that's the end of I hope that's not the end of the conversation. I'm still gonna, push back. So we'll see. We'll see. I'll update you next time.
um, and so like you work for Netflix, you did the short film, you do comic. Is there like a field of storytelling you want to explore next? Something different? I know we talk a lot about AI. I don't know if that's something, but like in general, like, what do you think is the future of storytelling? What do you want to explore more about?
For myself, my own personal like art project is gonna be back to comics,
Okay.
and I'm gonna try to incorporate some animation into it in a way that I've been thinking about. I haven't had a chance to test it out yet, but I've been writing.
Is it do you see Ryan Woodward? He
Yeah, I
did
see
like,
the baseball one.
is
Yeah.
it like is like that's the kind of idea, or is it different?
Um, I I want to try something different.
Okay.
I mean, it's not like super different, but like even within those that set of parameters that he's done, some uh, like how animation is incorporated into the panels and what triggers the animation and all of that. There's still tons to play with, and I don't think it's been explored that much. I think we can. It might be possible to me. Like it's still like a super unexplored area, uh, even though some comics have done it. But like that only means some comics have explored it in those number of ways, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the main questions is like, how do you not let animation distract from the storytelling in terms of
I,
a
s-
comic?
I saw there was like I was looking if I can find it. There was like a web comic that I saw that used animation in a very interesting way, but I can't find it right
I
now.
think you sent it to me
Yeah, like the
for moods, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
green and lighting and like flickering and stuff like
yeah,
that.
flickering. Yeah,
Yeah,
I like that one a lot. I don't know. I'll put it in the description down below if I find it. But
sure. Yeah, no,
um,
yeah, that one's
go ahead.
interesting.
Yeah. So, and and what do you think is so like that one is one of unexplored storytelling. Do you think there are other fields that are unexplored, that, especially like for animation industry? Do you think there's something that um, studios are undervaluing right now?
I mean, there's just so much, right? There's so much that can be done in animation, um, and it's all matter.
Do you think like the well, just because I'm this is like a YouTube channel, but do you think is there a possibility to have storytelling in a short form? Like now there's a YouTube short, a TikTok. It's just like I always wonder if there is a place for storytelling, because like most of like the good stuff that I see on these short form are more like entertaining bits, right? But it's not really like storytelling for the most part. Do you think is it possible to do storytelling in like a 10, 15 seconds? I mean, like I see I work in commercial, right? Like I see like there are good storytelling, but even like the Christmas commercial that came out this year that I work on has amazing storytelling, but that's like a minute. Like they had to make a special 1 minute commercial. It's not like 30 seconds.
Sure. I think, yeah. Again, you can go back to some comics. I mean, I go back to some comics because that's where I know a lot of that's where I learn a lot about storytelling. Like if you look at Bones, is it Bone or Bones? Bones, yeah. If you look at Bones, if you look at the Abominable Charles Christopher, if you look at those comics, what they do is they start off as 3-panel comics, 3-panel, 3-panel comics that's standalone, that has some entertainment value in of themselves, and but then after the first chapter or after a little bit into the story, they start to build upon it, but still maintaining the same short format. So that's something you could port over into animation. Um, even that,
Do they build like a bigger storytelling, or do they keep it
yeah,
to like
they
three
start to
panels?
expand on the worlds, expand on, but still keeping it just the same as 3 panels.
Okay.
I think it's a smart way, right? Because
Because I feel like it's an underserved. I mean, I'm okay. Like the other thing is like I'm not sure the audience on like TikTok or this like or YouTube short have the attention span to follow a story. I feel like the reason why there's like that little storytelling and that much entertainment is because entertainment grabs your attention, while storytelling needs time. Even in a 10-second, you might need like a contrast between like a quiet moment, 10 seconds. I don't know, but you know what I'm trying to say? Like I don't know if people would watch a 10-second storytelling moment.
um, I think you gotta look at the whole package, then the package as a whole, right? So, I think it's probably possible to start off with 10 seconds here and there, and then have one that is longer, which people who are into it are are more
Watch.
likely to
Yeah.
stay and watch. People who are new maybe will be more drawn to the 10-second stuff. Like, uh, yeah, like considering like playing to different attention spans, not so much based on the person, but based on the person's relationship to your story and your property. You know, like I think thinking it that more dynamic way might be more useful. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like it's such an underserved environment as far as storytelling. So that's why I'm always, I'm always interested in those kind of things. Also, because I feel like a lot of people in animation would be able, if they find a way to crack it, they will be able to create an independence for themselves, which is something I always talk about with you about. Like, I feel like a lot of artists needs to find their independence from studios if they want. Also, like if you want to work for a studio, right? Like if you have that independence, makes you more less in need of the job and more,
Yeah,
able
but you have to find. I don't know. I wonder if we have to follow the model of the influencers. You know, like I mean, I'm not a huge social media
I'm
expert,
not either. Weirdly enough, trying to have a YouTube channel, but yeah.
but like so much of the expert influencers, whether they're dancers or travelers or yoga teachers or models, they're constantly documenting their life, which is I don't know how if that's how I want to live my life. That's one, and number two, um, yeah, the production needs to be short, right? Like
Yeah.
dancing in front of a camera for in front of a phone for just like an hour and then finding something good. Like that's relatively short production time. I don't know if you can do that with animation as animation production currently stands, Like maybe AI will completely change everything that allows for that, but I don't know. But then at that point, if it's so accessible, um, will more people do it? Like, yeah, maybe a new form of social media independence that isn't the model of an influencer could happen. I'm not sure.
And I'm just gonna go
Maybe
back.
we can have a whole account uh, as a fictional animated character. I think there are some like AI generated um, avatars and characters who have accounts and they would, post things, and maybe that can be a way. You know what I mean? Like it's the whole account that tells one story, and it's like today, it's all fiction, but still, it's like they're dancing, but then in the dance, there's a interaction with their roommate or their partner, and the next day something else happens. Maybe that's a way. You know what I mean? Like the whole
That's not
account.
a bad idea. It's actually a pretty good idea. Not someone is gonna do it, but no, because it's a lot of work. I don't know if it's
It's a lot of work. I mean, it's a lot of writing, right?
yeah. I feel like also like the challenge of like a 10-second is you know, I don't remember who was it, like some famous writer, I think, or some Latin person. But like it was like they wrote like a long letter to someone, and then they finished writing. Sorry for the for the long letter. I didn't have time to make it shorter. Because like to make it short, like you have to work and try
Yeah,
to make it essential, and just take all the excess out, but still keeping like the core storytelling part
yeah.
alive. And that's a lot of work, way more than like a longer form for some aspects, right?
I don't know if
Well,
if
it's
if your definition of long form is not editing it down, then I don't think it's gonna be a good story. You know what I mean?
no, but like
Like
let's
at some
say,
point, you still want to distill
but like
it.
okay, then let's take like you know, if you like a 1 hour movie, if you want to take all that storytelling and make it 10 seconds, it's pretty much
But it
impossible.
would just be a different. Just needs to be a different thing. You can't think of it as a 1 hour movie anymore, right?
Yeah, but like you wouldn't be able to convey all that storytelling. There's a limit to a 10-second. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but yes, I think it just anyway. You just have to storytelling different way. That's some.
But going back to storyboarding briefly, so like if you had to give a suggestion to someone who wants to get into storyboarding, what do you think are maybe like the three main skills that someone should focus on to become a professional storyboard artist? In general, I mean, it might not be an artistic skill.
I mean, I think everyone. It's a given that you have to be good at drawing, right? So
Yeah.
you just have. And
Well, drawing, I feel like drawing is almost like speaking. It's expected that you can speak a language if you have to interact with people, right? You know, that's what I mean.
Yeah, and being good at drawing is like it's hard work, but it's not hard. It's not a difficult thing, right? You just have to keep practicing. It's gonna feel like a lot of work.
It's hard work until you get it. Like the beginning is very frustrating.
But everyone can get it. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, with enough practice,
yeah. I don't know. Just I would say whatever you consume, think about it. Whatever you consume, take some time after you've consumed it to just reflect on what you saw or what you heard. Think about the structure, think about what they were trying to say and how they arrived at it. Critique it in your mind. You don't have to, do anything super elaborate. I know people are like, oh, you have to do thumbnails of films and whatnot. And yeah, I'm not saying you should, sure, but I think it's an easier habit to build if it's about like just taking 5 minutes to think about what you just saw. Try to play the whole thing back in your head.
Yeah.
Practicing just rewatching things.
I think it's a different way of studying. I feel like I think it's like when you like run a marathon, you don't always do like long run. Sometimes you do splits because you're building speed instead of resistance. I feel like it's kind of like a similar thing. Like when you watch a movie and you just think about it, you're doing like splits. You're just like doing like something really fast, while like drawing thumbnails takes way more time. And maybe you get a deeper understanding of some of the choices the filmmaker makes, but it's not the only way you can study.
And I would say reflect on it and like literally just like critiquing it, not assuming that you know better or you know less, but thinking about what you would do differently. And eventually, I think over time doing this, like hopefully you can develop your own sense of what kind of story you would like to tell and how you would like to tell it, right? Basically like refining your thought process. And then the shot choices and all that stuff, those can come later. Those will come with time, right?
Yeah. I mean, like also like for shot choices, like in my experience, like when I started like on Carmen, I used to have huge folders of shots from movies that I will almost like take and like change, but like was literally like, oh, this moment I want something like this film in this shot. And then later on now, I still like do that at the beginning of a show. Like I take a picture that I think are inspiring that I want to achieve maybe, but I don't even look at them almost now. I just like have at the beginning and then I just go on and storyboard. While like at the very beginning, I was like almost like taking shots and use them, right?
Yeah. But... Sorry, give me a second. I think someone might... Nope, never mind. Sorry, I thought someone was going to enter. Nope, I am right. Anyway.
Yeah. Sorry?
Yeah. in terms of
Oh, I
reference
get.
and
I guess. Yeah, go ahead.
um, no, I have nothing to say about
um,
it.
I
Edit
guess
this
like
out.
the skill because we were talking about skills for aspiring story artists. The other thing is time management. Like, how do you organize your work? Because I know like you usually like get stuff done on time. Like you have like you're pretty good at with schedule delivering on deadlines and stuff. Like, how do you organize your work?
um,
If you do anything specific, particular, or
I mean, I've told you the shot list before,
yeah,
you
I
know,
use it. Like I learn it from you. I use it.
and so the shot list is the idea of like taking the script and knowing that the script doesn't say everything visually, doesn't describe everything visually. So just describing every shot to yourself in order to tell the script, and knowing why you're choosing those shots, and doing it in writing, doing it in words before you start drawing. Because when you start drawing, you start thinking about composition, start thinking about scale, perspective, all these things that are not related to story choices, right? And so it's more like, yeah, breaking it down to even more fundamental level of the visual story choices written down as a list. That's what I do. And then after that, I don't do thumbnails. I just go straight to um, the rough or the clean boards, and I try to avoid redrawing by doing that, basically, and try to draw like from the first drawing, try to make sure it's a drawing that is fine to pass to edit. That I don't have to. I might touch it to like make it look tidier, or maybe not tidier, but like, add a matte or add a few colors here and there, or add a few lines to make it a bit more clear. But otherwise, that's how I like to save time.
But like the other thing, I think as an advice to aspiring story artists is asking why, because I feel like that's the thing I find so unique about you, like of the people I work with, is like you always ask why, even like in meetings with directors, or maybe like they want to go in a different direction, right, than the one you propose, and usually like I feel like you always ask, well, why do you want to do this? Like, what are you trying to achieve? Because sometimes directors, supervisor, they suggest something, but if you understand the reason behind it, then you might find a different solution for it, right? And the same thing is with scripts. Like when you read the script, if you ask yourself why this is happening, or you ask your director why are we trying to do this, you might find a different solution for your storyboard, right?
Yeah, essentially, in my opinion, by asking why, you're holding the director, you're separating the reason and the thought process of the story, of the storytelling, from the authority, essentially, right? The moment you ask why and they have to justify it, I mean, they can always pull the authority card. They can always say, I'm the director and that's what I want. But then at least it's clear that's what they're doing. It's clear to everyone in the room that at that point, they're not saying this is the best thing for the story. They're saying they're laying out down their authority card. But if they are trying to be a good director and they want to at least appear like they're trying to tell the best story that they can, which is the goal of everyone just in the room, then that gets separated. And at the moment they say that, yes, it's still coming from an authority figure, you can then, talk about that reasoning that they gave or expand on it or whatnot. It becomes a bit more creatively accessible to us lowly artists.
Yeah, I feel also like at least like when we have a conversation and and I have ideas, and you end up like, why do you want to do that? Like, why is this? It forced me to clarify to myself the reason behind what I want to do in storytelling, or even like with the YouTube channel and stuff like that. And I think it's the same thing happens with directors, right? Like they have so many moving parts, and sometimes I think some of the one I had, they just get caught up in this like machine of trying to get this thing out, right?
Yeah.
And asking why makes them stop and elaborate on the reason behind their choices, right? It helps them also clarify some of the choices.
Yeah, and hope that it helps us reconnect with our priorities and why we were doing this in the first place. You know, going back to the film that I was talking about, right? We have to give up on perfection, but then what's more important than perfection, in my opinion, is, how you're deriving meaning from what you're doing, and we have to connect to that through whys.
And on that inspirational phrase, thank you for your time, Wei. I appreciate it.
Well,
And yeah, and I hope this was helpful to someone. At least I enjoyed it. I don't know if anyone found it enjoyable, but we'll see.
we'll see.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.